You're not watching this by accident. You didn't click randomly. You saw 333, and something in you paused, not fear, not excitement, recognition. And now you're here because a part of you already knows something is shifting. Listen carefully. You're closer than you think, not close in a motivational way, close in a structural way. Close because the version of you that creates your next level is already forming. And 333 is not magic. It's alignment meeting awareness. You don't see repeating numbers when you're asleep in your own life. You see them when your perception is sharpening, when your mind is beginning to notice patterns, when your subconscious is preparing you for expansion. You think you're waiting for something to happen, but something has already started. Now I'm going to tell you exactly what 333 means for you. And if this message found you, you need to listen all the way through. 1. You are not stuck. You are stabilizing. You think nothing is happening. Be honest. You've looked at your life recently and thought, why does it feel like I'm in the same place? You expected visible proof by now. More money, more recognition, clear movement. A dramatic shift that you could point to and say, there, that's it. But progress does not always arrive as applause. Sometimes it arrives as silence. You've been trained to believe growth must look loud. Promotions, announcements, sudden wins, viral moments, big relationships, big breakthroughs, big declarations. But the most dangerous growth is the kind that happens internally without noise. Because when growth is quiet, you mislabel it as stagnation. And that's where you are right now. And you think you're stuck because the outside hasn't exploded yet. But internally, your system has been reorganizing. 333 represents balance before acceleration. Not hype, not chaos, balance. 3 is structure. Think about it. A tripod stands firm because it has 3 points. A triangle is stable because it distributes pressure evenly. Even storytelling follows 3 acts because it creates coherence and direction. 3 is foundation. 3 repeated is reinforcement. When you see 333, it symbolizes reinforcement of structure. Internal alignment tightening, weak points being corrected, foundations being strengthened. Acceleration without structure leads to collapse. If you receive money without discipline, you lose it. If you receive attention without identity stability, you self-sabotage. And if you receive love without emotional maturity, you destroy it. So what feels like nothing happening is actually reinforcement. You've been uncomfortable lately, haven't you? There's been this strange tension. Not full-blown crisis, not disaster, just a subtle pressure. You've doubted yourself more than usual. You've questioned your timing. You've wondered if maybe you missed your window. You look at other people and think, they're moving. Why am I not? But here's what you don't see. Your internal standards have changed. 6 months ago, you tolerated things you wouldn't tolerate now. You entertained conversations that now feel draining. You accepted behavior that now feels beneath you. You chased things that now feel unnecessary. That shift didn't happen loudly. It happened quietly. Your beliefs have been adjusting. Even you're thinking differently, slower, more deliberate, less reactive. You don't jump into emotional storms the way you used to. That's stabilization. You're recalibrating your nervous system. You're no longer addicted to chaos. And chaos used to feel like movement to you. So now that things feel calmer, your mind mistakes calm for stagnation. But calm is power under control. Your tolerance for low-level behavior has been shrinking. That's not ego. That's clarity. You're recognizing patterns faster. You're seeing through manipulation quicker. You're walking away earlier. That is not stagnation. That is calibration. Calibration is uncomfortable because it feels like isolation. When you stop operating at your old frequency, you temporarily disconnect from environments that matched it. You feel alone, out of place, in between versions. That in-between phase is stabilization. You are building the mental structure required to hold what you've been asking for. And you've been asking for more. More income, more peace, more influence, more impact, more alignment. But here's the brutal truth. Most people cannot hold what they ask for. They want success but collapse under responsibility. They want attention but crumble under scrutiny. They want abundance but panic when they have to manage it. Capacity determines sustainability. You are building capacity. Capacity doesn't look glamorous. It looks like discipline when no one is watching. It looks like saying no when yes would feel easier. It looks like emotional restraint when reacting would feel satisfying. It looks like consistency when motivation is low. You're not stuck. You're strengthening load-bearing walls. And walls are built brick by brick, not with fireworks. If you skip stabilization, you sabotage acceleration. Because expansion magnifies weakness. If your foundation is fragile, growth will expose it. 333 shows up when capacity is forming. It's not a promise of instant reward. It's a checkpoint. It's a reminder that your internal alignment is catching up to your desires. And that matters more than you realize. Right now, you are in what most people misinterpret as a plateau. But a plateau is not a dead end. It's preparation. Athletes plateau before breakthroughs. Businesses plateau before scaling. Writers plateau before clarity sharpens. Investors plateau before exponential returns. The plateau is where refinement happens, where inefficiencies are eliminated, and where discipline is tested, where identity solidifies. You feel like you're waiting, but you're actually consolidating. Consolidation is when scattered energy becomes focused. You're less impulsive, less desperate, less frantic. That might feel boring to your old self, but boring is stable, and stable is powerful. You don't need another loud sign. You need to recognize the quiet work happening inside you. You're thinking more strategically, you're choosing more intentionally, you're reacting less emotionally. That is structural reinforcement. And structure precedes speed. When acceleration comes, and it won't feel chaotic. It will feel earned. It will feel natural. It will feel like a continuation, not a shock, because you stabilized first. So stop telling yourself you're behind. Stop measuring progress only by visible outcomes. Measure it by your internal upgrades. Are you calmer? Are you clearer? Are you less willing to settle? Are you more disciplined? Are you more aware of your own patterns? If the answer is yes, then you are not stuck. You are stabilizing. And stabilization is the final quiet phase before visible momentum begins. 333 didn't appear to hype you. It appeared to remind you. You're building the structure. And once the structure locks in, acceleration doesn't need permission. It happens. 2. Your old identity is losing control. You feel different lately, and it's subtle enough that you can't fully explain it. You're not a completely new person, but you're not the same either. Certain things that used to trigger you don't hit the same. And certain people don't have the same emotional pull. Certain habits feel heavier than they used to. That shift is not random. Your old identity is losing control. And that is uncomfortable. Most people think growth feels empowering from the beginning. It doesn't. Growth feels disorienting first, because identity is not just how you see yourself. Identity is your comfort zone. Your identity decides how much you tolerate, how much you earn, who you chase, who you avoid, what you believe is possible. When that structure starts to crack, the mind panics. You've operated from a certain version of yourself for years. Maybe that version was anxious but driven. Maybe it was insecure but ambitious. Maybe it was reactive but passionate. Whatever it was familiar. Now something is shifting, and you're catching yourself before reacting. You're noticing patterns in real time. You're questioning your impulses instead of obeying them. That's not weakness. That's awareness expanding. But awareness destabilizes the old self. The old identity thrived on urgency. It thrived on chasing validation. It thrived on proving something. The new version of you is quieter, more observant, less impressed, less desperate for immediate reassurance. And that quiet power feels unfamiliar. So doubt shows up. You start hearing internal questions. Am I losing my edge? Am I becoming lazy? Why don't I feel the same intensity anymore? Because intensity used to equal movement. But intensity is not the same as power. Sometimes intensity is just anxiety disguised as ambition. When 333 appears during this phase, it's not a mystical code. It's a mirror. It reflects transition. 3 represents structure. 3 repeated represents restructuring. Your identity is restructuring. And restructuring always feels unstable before it feels strong. Imagine tearing down internal walls that defined you for years. You built your personality around certain reactions. Maybe you were the one who always overworks. Maybe you were the one who always chases. Maybe you were the one who tolerates too much. Now those patterns are weakening. And when a pattern weakens, there's a temporary void. You don't fully know who you are without it yet. That void can feel like confusion. But confusion is often expansion in disguise. You're not lost. You're in between identities, and in between phases are the most misunderstood part of growth. Your old identity wants certainty, and it wants quick proof that this shift is working. It wants external confirmation that you're still on track. But the new identity doesn't need constant reassurance. It moves with quiet conviction. That's why things feel slower. Not because you're regressing. Because you're becoming deliberate. Your old self thrived on emotional spikes. High highs, low lows, drama, urgency. Now you're stabilizing emotionally. And without chaos, you don't feel the same adrenaline. But adrenaline is not alignment. Adrenaline is stimulation. Alignment is calm. And calm feels strange when you're used to turbulence. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They mistake calm for boredom. They reintroduce chaos to feel alive again. They pick fights. They create urgency. They chase distractions. All to feel familiar discomfort. It's because familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar growth. Your old identity is fighting for relevance. It whispers, maybe this shift isn't real. Maybe nothing is changing. Maybe you're overthinking everything. That voice is not intuition. It's the ego defending territory. Identity is territorial. It wants consistency, even if that consistency keeps you limited. But something inside you has outgrown your previous ceiling. You're less willing to beg, less willing to prove, less willing to explain yourself unnecessarily. That's evolution. You're starting to operate from choice, not compulsion. That's a massive shift. And when you see 333 during this period, it's confirmation of transition, not completion. It doesn't mean you've arrived. It means the dismantling process is active. When you are detaching from behaviors that once defined you. You're not chasing the same dopamine hits. You're not reacting with the same emotional intensity. You're thinking longer term. That's identity upgrading. But upgrading feels unstable before it feels powerful. Because you can't rely on old reflexes anymore. You're becoming more conscious, and consciousness slows you down at first. You pause before speaking. You pause before texting. You pause before reacting. That pause feels unnatural. But that pause is power. The old identity was automatic. The new identity is intentional. Intentional living feels slower. But it builds differently. Right now, you're not failing, you're shedding. And shedding is messy. It's uncomfortable to watch parts of yourself dissolve. But those parts were built for an earlier chapter. You're not meant to operate at the same psychological level forever. Growth requires friction. And friction feels like doubt. The key is not to interpret discomfort as regression. Discomfort during identity transition is evidence of change. If nothing was shifting, you would feel familiar. You don't feel familiar anymore, that's the point. You're evolving past your previous emotional baseline. You're not as easily triggered, not as easily impressed, not as easily shaken. And that threatens the old structure. But you cannot step into a new reality with an outdated identity. You are not losing yourself, you are refining yourself. And refinement feels like subtraction before it feels like elevation. 333 appears during identity collapse because collapse precedes construction. Your old patterns are losing authority, and your new patterns are gaining ground. The instability you feel is not chaos, it's reconstruction, and reconstruction is not comfortable, but it is necessary. You're not confused, you're transitioning, and once the new identity stabilizes, your external reality will start matching it. But first, the internal shift must complete. Let the old self dissolve. Stop trying to resurrect patterns you've already outgrown. You are not becoming less powerful. You are becoming less reactive. And that is a higher level of power. Stay steady. The version of you that's emerging doesn't need to chase. It doesn't need to panic. It doesn't need to prove. It moves differently. And you're beginning to feel it. 3. Your energy shifts before your reality does. You keep checking the outside, checking your bank account, checking your messages, checking engagement, checking reactions, checking for visible proof that something has changed. And when you don't see immediate evidence, you assume nothing is moving. That assumption is the mistake. External reality is slow, internal shifts are instant. But you've been conditioned to trust what you see more than what you feel. So when your circumstances look the same, you convince yourself you're the same. You're not. Energy shifts first. Behavior adjusts second. Results follow last. Always. Think about any major transformation you've ever had. Before the money came, your thinking changed. Before the relationship improved, your standards changed. Before the opportunity appeared, your perception sharpened. The shift began internally long before it became visible. But because you couldn't measure it yet, you didn't value it. Right now, your internal state is not what it was months ago. You don't tolerate the same nonsense. You don't chase the same validation. You don't react with the same intensity. That's not small, that's fundamental. Energy is not mystical, it's psychological alignment. It's the sum of your dominant thoughts, emotional patterns, expectations, and subconscious assumptions. When those begin to shift, your reality has no choice but to reorganize. But reorganization takes time. You planted new mental seeds. You don't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing. Yet that's what you're doing with your life. You shift your mindset for 2 weeks and expect visible transformation. When you don't see it, you panic. But the visible world operates on delay. Your external world is a reflection of previous internal states. What you see today was created by who you were weeks or months ago. So if you've recently upgraded internally, you're in what feels like a bridge phase. The bridge phase is dangerous because it feels like nothing is happening. But something is. The old momentum is dying, the new momentum is forming, and there's a gap in between. That gap is where doubt attacks. You start thinking, maybe this isn't working. Maybe I imagined the shift. Maybe I'm delusional. No, you're early. You changed your frequency, but the echo hasn't returned yet. Think about this logically. If you stop reacting emotionally to disrespect, your relationships will change. If you stop spending impulsively, your finances will change. If you stop procrastinating, your results will change, but not overnight. There's a lag, and most people sabotage themselves during the lag. They revert to old behaviors because they don't see instant feedback. You are in that lag right now. Your internal energy has crossed a threshold. You feel it. You feel less desperate, less chaotic, less scattered. You think more strategically. You pause more often. You question your own impulses. That's not random. That's coherence forming. Coherence is when your thoughts, emotions, and actions start aligning instead of contradicting each other. Before, you might have wanted success but feared responsibility, wanted love but feared vulnerability, wanted wealth but feared risk. That internal contradiction creates mixed results. Now something is cleaning up inside you. You're becoming clearer about what you want. And clarity is powerful. But clarity doesn't immediately produce results. It produces direction. Direction produces consistent action. Consistent action produces results. You're still in the direction phase. That's why 333 appears now. It's not a jackpot code. It's reinforcement. 3 is balance. 3 repeated is stabilized alignment. Your internal alignment is tightening. You're less distracted, less reactive to drama, less tempted by shortcuts. That shift alone changes everything. But here's where your mind tries to trick you. Because your circumstances haven't dramatically improved yet, your brain tells you the shift isn't real. But the brain seeks certainty. Growth requires uncertainty. But you're being asked to trust the process of internal refinement without external applause. That's maturity. And maturity is rare. Most people only believe in themselves when they see evidence. But evidence is always delayed. You're upgrading internally in ways you can't fully measure. Your standards are rising. Your patience is increasing. Your emotional regulation is strengthening. Those are invisible upgrades, but they control visible outcomes. You don't attract better opportunities by begging. You attract them by becoming stable enough to recognize and handle them. You don't attract better relationships by chasing. You attract them by becoming emotionally grounded. You don't create better results by panicking. You create them by being consistent when nothing dramatic is happening. And your energy has shifted from urgency to steadiness. And steadiness wins long term. But because urgency feels intense, you mistake intensity for effectiveness. You used to operate in emotional spikes, high excitement, high anxiety, high reaction. Now you operate more evenly. That feels boring. But boring is sustainable, and sustainable is scalable. When you see 333 during this stage, it's confirmation that your internal system is recalibrating. You are no longer vibrating at the same level of chaos. That's not spiritual fluff, that's behavioral change. You think before acting. You assess before reacting. You delay gratification more often. That alone separates you from most people. But because it's not flashy, you underestimate it. Stop expecting fireworks. Real transformation feels like discipline. It feels like consistency when you don't feel motivated. It feels like choosing long-term gain over short-term dopamine. Your reality hasn't caught up yet because it's still echoing your old patterns. But those patterns are dissolving. Give it time. The world rearranges itself according to who you consistently are, not who you are for a few emotional days. Consistency builds momentum. Momentum builds visible change, and you are at the momentum building stage. This stage requires faith in structure, not blind belief, but rational patience. You changed internally. Now let the external recalibrate. If you stay aligned, the evidence will show up. But if you panic and revert, you reset the clock. Your energy shifts first. Your reality follows. Don't confuse delay with denial. You are not being ignored, and you are being prepared. And the more stable your internal frequency becomes, the more dramatic the external shift will feel when it arrives. Stay steady. The echo is coming. 4. You are closer than you think. This is the part your mind resists. You are closer than you think. Not in a motivational way, not in a just believe way. Structurally closer. Psychologically closer. Closer because the gap between who you are and who you need to be has narrowed significantly. But you can't see it yet because you're measuring distance incorrectly. You measure distance by results. You measure proximity by visible reward. But breakthroughs don't announce themselves with warning signs. They build pressure quietly. And pressure feels uncomfortable. You've been feeling it. Restlessness, impatience, a strange sense that something is building beneath the surface. You think that tension means you're behind. It doesn't. It means compression is happening, and compression always comes before expansion. Think about it logically. A spring compresses before it launches. A muscle tightens before it exerts force. Water pressure builds before it bursts through a barrier. Expansion requires stored energy. You are storing energy right now. That's why it feels intense. That's why you can't fully relax. That's why there's this internal voice saying, something is about to change. You're not crazy. You're sensing momentum forming. But here's the dangerous part. Most people quit during compression. They interpret pressure as failure. They mistake silence for stagnation. They assume that because they haven't seen the reward yet, the effort isn't working. And they step off the path inches before the breakthrough. You don't see the breakthrough because you're inside it. When you're too close to something, you lose perspective. If you stand 1 inch away from a painting, you can't see the full image. You only see texture. Right now, you're too close to your own growth to recognize it. You're judging yourself daily, analyzing every small outcome, comparing your timeline to other people. But proximity hides progress. You're no longer operating at the same mental level you were before. Your reactions are different. Your discipline is stronger. Your awareness is sharper. Those are not small changes. They are foundational changes. And foundational changes precede visible leaps. Here's what you need to understand. When you are far from a breakthrough, you feel numb. When you are close to a breakthrough, you feel tension. Tension means resistance is being tested. The old version of you is being pushed out of dominance. The new version is trying to solidify. That internal friction creates discomfort, but discomfort does not equal failure. It equals transition. You are closer than you think because your mindset has already shifted, and mindset is the hardest part. Money can change fast. Opportunities can appear suddenly. Relationships can shift quickly. But identity shifts slowly. And your identity has been shifting. You no longer think in survival mode the way you used to. You think in long-term positioning. You don't chase the same distractions. You don't tolerate the same disrespect. You don't waste energy proving yourself to people who don't matter. That's elevation. And elevation reduces the distance between you and your next level. But your brain is addicted to visible milestones. It wants numbers, dates, certainty. It wants to know exactly when things will change. But growth doesn't operate on your emotional schedule. It operates on readiness. You are closer because you are more ready than you were before. If the opportunity arrived a year ago, you might have mishandled it. If the relationship arrived earlier, you might have sabotaged it. If the money arrived sooner, you might have mismanaged it. You weren't ready then. You are far more ready now. And readiness shortens distance. But the mind plays tricks. Right before success, doubt spikes. Right before breakthrough, fear increases. Right before elevation, self-sabotage urges intensify. Why? Why? Because the old identity senses displacement. It knows it's about to lose control, so it creates mental noise. It tries to convince you to slow down, to distract yourself, to settle, to go back to what's familiar. Familiar feels safe, even if familiar kept you limited. You are closer than you think because you're uncomfortable in ways you weren't before. Comfort means stagnation. Tension means growth. Look at your recent behavior. You're more disciplined, more intentional, more aware of time, more selective with energy. Those behaviors don't appear randomly. They appear when someone is approaching a new level of responsibility. And responsibility precedes reward. You are being shaped for something larger. And shaping involves pressure. Imagine sculpting stone. The chisel strikes repeatedly. From the outside, it looks like damage. but from a distance it's refinement. You feel like you're being struck by uncertainty, but you're being refined, and refinement reduces the gap. You are closer than you think because your excuses are weakening. You can't lie to yourself as easily anymore. You catch your own procrastination. You see your own patterns. You recognize when you're about to sabotage progress. That awareness alone places you ahead of your old self. And being ahead of your old self means you're closer to your new reality. But you won't feel it until the visible shift happens. And visible shifts often happen suddenly, after long periods of quiet preparation. People call it luck. They say that happened fast. It didn't happen fast, it was building quietly. You are in that quiet building phase, and it feels slow because there's no applause yet. But internally, the architecture is complete. The final adjustments are happening. And once those lock in, movement accelerates quickly. The danger is not that you're far. The danger is that you'll misinterpret proximity as failure. You'll give up inches before impact. You'll relax discipline because you don't see immediate reward. You'll assume you miscalculated. You didn't. You're closer than you think. Closer because you're thinking differently. Closer because you're acting differently. Closer because your emotional reactions have matured. Closer because you're no longer willing to settle for what once satisfied you. Distance shrinks when identity rises, and your identity has risen, even if your circumstances haven't fully caught up yet. Stay steady, and the tension you feel is not a warning sign, it's a countdown. And if you don't sabotage this phase with impatience, the shift will not feel gradual, it will feel sudden. But it will only feel sudden because you didn't see how close you already were. 5. Stop looking for external confirmation. You saw 333 and something inside you reacted. You paused, you felt something, you thought, this means something. And then immediately, you wanted confirmation. You wanted someone to explain it, decode it, validate it, tell you exactly what it guarantees. That instinct right there is the deeper lesson. You are still looking outside yourself for permission to believe in your own movement, and that is the subtle weakness holding you back. Let's strip this down logically. A number repeating does not change your life, and your interpretation of it does. If you treat 333 like a magical promise that something good will fall into your lap, you weaken your own agency. If you treat 333 like a psychological checkpoint, a reminder of alignment, discipline, awareness, you strengthen yourself. The power is not in the sign, the power is in what you do after seeing it. Most people misuse signs. They wait, they relax, they say, okay, something is coming. And then they sit back. That's delusion. A sign is not a delivery, it's a mirror. It reflects where your focus already is. You've been thinking about growth, about change, about breakthrough, about leveling up. And when your mind is primed for something, you start noticing patterns connected to it. That's not mystical, that's attention sharpening. When you decide to buy a certain car, and you suddenly see that car everywhere, it was always there, you just weren't tuned to it. Right now, you are tuned to expansion, so symbols of alignment stand out. But here's the real danger. If you constantly look for external confirmation, you train yourself to distrust your internal conviction. You start thinking, I'll move when I see another sign. I'll believe when something else confirms it. I'll commit when the universe makes it obvious. That hesitation delays momentum, and momentum is fragile. The strongest people don't move because they saw a sign. They move because they decided. The sign just reinforced what they already knew. Ask yourself honestly. Before you saw 333, weren't you already feeling something shifting? Weren't you already sensing pressure? Weren't you already thinking about change? And the number didn't create the shift. It highlighted it. You don't need the universe to approve your ambition. You don't need repeated patterns to justify discipline. You don't need confirmation to act aligned. When you rely on external signals, you outsource your authority, and when you outsource authority, you weaken identity. Your growth requires internal validation, not blind arrogance, but grounded conviction. You need to be able to say, I'm moving because I've decided to move. I'm disciplined because that's who I am becoming. I'm consistent because my future requires it. Not, I'm acting because I saw something. That's the difference between empowerment and dependency. Signs can be reminders. They should never be crutches. If you wait for perfect reassurance, you will never act boldly. There will always be uncertainty, there will always be risk, there will always be doubt. External confirmation feels comforting because it reduces responsibility. If something fails, you can say, well, I thought it was a sign. But when you act from internal clarity, you own the outcome. Ownership is uncomfortable, but ownership builds power. Right now, you are at a point where your intuition is sharpening. You feel when something is off. You sense when something is aligned. You know when you're procrastinating. You know when you're disciplined. You don't need external validation to confirm what you already feel. And if you keep searching for it, you delay growth. Here's what's really happening. You don't fully trust your own authority yet. You're still building it, so you look for reinforcement. That's human. But maturity requires shifting from seeking reassurance to creating direction. Think about leaders. They don't wait for signs. They interpret signals and act decisively. They don't require repeated confirmation to commit. They choose. That's what you're being pushed toward. Seeing 333 is not about fate handing you something. It's about asking you a question. Will you move like someone who already believes in their own trajectory? Or will you keep looking for permission? Permission is addictive. It feels safe, but it keeps you smaller than you're meant to be. If you truly believe you are closer than you think, then your behavior must reflect that. Closer people move differently. They sharpen discipline, they refine strategy, they protect energy. They don't sit back waiting for a miracle. They prepare like impact is imminent. That's the correct interpretation of a sign. Preparation, not passivity. Alignment, not avoidance. If 333 appears during your journey, let it remind you of structure. Balance your emotions. Balance your actions. Balance ambition with patience. But do not use it as an excuse to delay responsibility. External confirmation can motivate, but internal conviction sustains. And sustainability is what creates lasting breakthroughs. If you need constant reassurance, you will constantly doubt. If you build internal certainty, you will act consistently even in silence. Right now, silence is part of the process. There is no loud announcement, no dramatic validation, just you, your discipline, your thoughts, your actions. That's enough. Stop scanning for more signs and start becoming the evidence. When your behavior matches your ambition daily, you won't need numbers to reassure you. You'll know. And that knowing is stronger than any repeated pattern you could ever see. The universe doesn't confirm you. You confirm yourself. And once that shifts, everything else follows. 6. This is a test of discipline, not faith. You think this moment is about belief. It's not. Belief is easy when you feel inspired. Belief is easy when you see repeating signs. Belief is easy when motivation is high. Discipline is what matters when none of that is present. Right now, you are not being tested on whether you trust the universe. You are being tested on whether you can stay consistent without emotional stimulation. That's a different level of growth. Anyone can feel aligned for a day. Anyone can feel powerful after watching a message. Anyone can feel confident when momentum is obvious. But can you stay sharp when nothing dramatic is happening? Can you stay structured when results are delayed? Can you maintain habits when there is no applause? That's the real test, and most people fail it. They confuse signs with guarantees. They see 333 and assume something external will move automatically. But nothing moves automatically. Alignment without execution is just potential. And potential means nothing without repetition. You are in a phase where your habits matter more than your feelings. You won't always feel motivated. You won't always feel confident. You won't always feel certain. But if your identity is shifting upward, your behavior must reflect that shift consistently. Indiscipline is proof of identity. If you say you are becoming focused but you scroll endlessly, that's contradiction. If you say you are leveling up but you procrastinate daily, that's delusion. If you say you are closer than you think but you act casually, that's self-sabotage. This stage is fragile. Close is not finished. Close requires precision. When you're far from a breakthrough, sloppy effort doesn't matter much. When you're close, small mistakes compound. That's why this phase feels intense. Your margin for distraction is shrinking. Your tolerance for inconsistency is shrinking. You can feel it. You know when you waste time now. You know when you lower your standard. You know when you break your own word. And that awareness makes laziness uncomfortable. That's growth. But growth demands follow-through. And discipline is not punishment. It's alignment in action. If your future requires a stronger version of you, then your present behavior must start matching that version. And that doesn't require excitement. It requires repetition. Wake up and execute. Think clearly and execute. Protect your energy and execute. Whether you feel spiritual or not. Whether you see more signs or not. Whether results show up today or not. This is where most people collapse. They feel close. They sense momentum. Then they relax too early. They think, it's coming anyway. And they soften their discipline. That softness delays impact. You cannot drift into the next level. You must walk into it deliberately. The uncomfortable truth is this. If you truly believe you are close to something bigger, your behavior should tighten, not loosen. And athletes don't relax before a championship. They focus more. Entrepreneurs don't become careless before scaling. They refine more. Serious people sharpen when they feel proximity. They don't get lazy. Ask yourself honestly, have you been as disciplined as someone who knows they're close? Or have you been coasting because you think it's already guaranteed? Faith without structure creates disappointment. Structure without emotion creates results. You don't need to feel inspired every day. You need to be reliable every day. Reliable to your own word. Reliable to your schedule. Reliable to your standards. When you show up consistently, even when nothing dramatic is happening, you prove to yourself that you're not dependent on hype. You become self-led, and self-led individuals don't crumble during silence. Silence is part of mastery. No spotlight, no validation, just repetition. This is where identity locks in. Not during big wins, during boring days, during quiet mornings, during nights when you could skip effort but choose not to. That's the difference between someone who almost makes it and someone who does. Almost requires belief, actually requires discipline. You're being observed by no one but yourself. And that's the point. If you can stay consistent when nobody is watching, when nothing flashy is happening, when you're not emotionally charged, then you are ready. Readiness is behavioral, not emotional. You don't become ready because you feel powerful. You become ready because you are stable. Stability creates trust. Trust creates momentum. Momentum creates visible change. Right now, you are stabilizing through repetition. Every disciplined choice reinforces your identity. Every excuse weakens it. And the more consistent you become, the faster reality rearranges around you. This phase is not glamorous, it's mechanical. But mechanics win. You are closer than you think, which means your standards must rise, your focus must sharpen, your distractions must decrease, not because a sign told you to, because your future requires it. Faith says something is possible. Discipline says, I will behave like it already is. And discipline is what separates intention from outcome. If you pass this phase, or if you remain steady without needing constant reassurance, then when the shift happens, you won't panic, you won't fumble it, you won't sabotage it, you'll step into it smoothly, right? Because you trained for it quietly. This is not about hoping something good happens. This is about proving you are capable of sustaining something good when it arrives. And that proof is built in silence. Stay sharp, stay structured. Act like someone who is already on the edge of breakthrough. Because if you truly are close, this is the moment that determines whether you cross the line or step back. 7. Don't self-sabotage the shift. This is the most dangerous phase, not when you're far from your goal, not when you're lost, not when you're unaware, right now, when you are close. Because self-sabotage does not appear when you're asleep. It appears when you're about to elevate. And it doesn't look dramatic. It looks subtle, and it looks like procrastination disguised as rest. It looks like distraction disguised as balance. It looks like lowering your standard just once. It looks like tolerating something small that you know you've outgrown. Self-sabotage rarely screams. It whispers. You'll feel it as an urge to slack off, an urge to reintroduce chaos, an urge to text someone you already moved past, an urge to delay something important. And the dangerous part is that it feels justified. Your mind will rationalize it. It's not that serious. I deserve a break. I'll get back on track tomorrow. But you need to understand something clearly. Right before a breakthrough, resistance spikes, not because you're failing, because your nervous system is adjusting to expansion. Expansion feels unsafe to the brain. The brain prefers predictable pain over unpredictable growth. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar success. So when your life starts aligning, when your discipline tightens, when your awareness sharpens, the old wiring panics. It says, this is unfamiliar, go back. That's self-sabotage. It's not weakness, it's outdated programming. And if you don't recognize it immediately, it resets your momentum. You've worked too hard internally to allow subtle regression now. You are closer than you think, and proximity creates fear. When you're far from something, you can fantasize safely. When you're close, it becomes real. Real means responsibility. Real means visibility. Real means expectation. And that weight can trigger avoidance. You might suddenly feel tired, unmotivated, distracted, yet not because you're incapable, because the stakes feel higher. The closer you get, the more your actions matter, and that pressure can feel overwhelming if you're not grounded. So you need awareness. When you feel the urge to pull back, pause. Ask yourself directly, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? Not who you were, not who your comfort zone prefers. Who you are becoming? You've already shed parts of your old identity. You've already stabilized internally. You've already sharpened your focus. Now is not the time to compromise. Self-sabotage thrives in small decisions. It doesn't need dramatic failure. It needs tiny lapses repeated consistently. Skip one disciplined action. Ignore one boundary. Delay one important step, then repeat. That's how momentum dissolves. You cannot afford autopilot right now. You must stay conscious. The old version of you will try one last time to regain control. It will tempt you with familiarity, familiar people, familiar habits, familiar emotional cycles. And it will feel comfortable. Comfort is not always safety. Sometimes comfort is stagnation disguised as relief. You are being stretched into a higher version of yourself, and stretching feels uncomfortable, but shrinking back feels easier. Don't shrink. You didn't come this far to return to a smaller mindset. Another form of self-sabotage is doubt. You'll start questioning everything. Maybe I'm not as ready as I thought. Maybe this shift isn't real. Maybe I overestimated myself. That doubt is not logic. It's fear of expansion. You must separate constructive evaluation from emotional retreat. Your constructive evaluation sharpens you. Emotional retreat weakens you. If you need to refine, refine. If you need to adjust, adjust. But don't retreat. Retreat resets growth. You are too aware now to pretend you don't see your patterns. You are too disciplined now to act casually. You are too close now to relax your standards. The final stretch of growth is mental. It's not about talent, not about luck, not about signs. It's about whether you maintain identity under pressure, if you can stay consistent while fear whispers, if you can stay focused while distractions invite you, if you can protect your energy while old habits call you back, then you win. Self-sabotage is the last barrier, not external obstacles, internal inconsistency. You must decide who is in control, your old wiring or your new structure. Every day you choose, not with words, with actions. And actions compound. If you stay aligned now, the breakthrough will not shock you. It will feel earned. It will feel stable. It will feel natural. But if you drift even slightly, you extend the timeline. Not because the opportunity disappeared, because you stepped out of alignment. You are not fragile, but momentum is. Protect it, guard it, respect it. You are closer than you think. And this is the moment where most people disqualify themselves, not because they weren't capable, because they relaxed too early. Don't relax, refine, don't doubt, decide, don't drift, direct. You've already done the internal work, you've stabilized, you've shifted identity, you've strengthened discipline, now finish strong. Right? Because if you hold this level just a little longer, without self-sabotage, the shift you've been feeling won't remain internal. It will become visible, and when it does, you'll realize you were never far. You were just one disciplined stretch away. You saw 333. You felt something. You listened. Now understand this clearly. Nothing changes because you saw a sign. Everything changes because you decided to align with it. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not waiting for permission. You are in a transition phase most people never survive. The quiet phase where identity shifts, discipline tightens, and self-sabotage tries one last time. You are closer than you think. Closer because your standards have risen. Closer because your reactions have matured. Closer because your awareness has sharpened. Closer because you no longer tolerate the version of yourself that kept you small. That is not coincidence. That is construction. If you leave with one truth, let it be this. Do not relax your discipline just because you feel proximity. Sharpen it. Do not wait for more confirmation. Become the confirmation. Do not let doubt reset what alignment has built. Hold your structure, because the shift you're sensing is not fantasy. It's pressure building, and pressure only builds when something is about to move. Stay steady. Stay deliberate. Stay aligned. You didn't see 333 to be entertained. You saw it to wake up. Now move like someone who understands that they are not far anymore. They are approaching. And the difference between approaching and arriving is one final stretch of consistency.